Turning now to the APEC summit, Prime Minister Mark Carney says the Canada-China relationship is at a turning point after meeting with President Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the summit. Rafi Boudjikanian is traveling with the Prime Minister.
A handshake with a country where a cold shoulder has been the norm for years.
Our countries have a long history of cooperation, engagement, and trade. 55 years of diplomatic relations marked the anniversary 2 weeks ago. In recent years, we have not been as engaged.
There has been no formal sit-down between a Canadian leader and Chinese President Xi Jinping since 2017, and plenty of clashes between Beijing and Ottawa since. The Canadian Parliament has accused China of genocide for its treatment of its minority Uyghur population. And in January, a public inquiry into foreign interference concluded Beijing was the main state actor interfering in 2 recent Canadian elections. Xi congratulated Carney on his recent election victory, also saying he wants to work with Canada to re-establish relations.
I don't think there's a prime minister out there who would have been in a position to have some kind of a reset of the relationship immediately.
This observer says enough time has passed for the 2 countries to start talking again.
For Canada, the imperative to diversify our trading relationships on quite an urgent basis is there, since the arrival of the Trump administration.
For the Prime Minister, meanwhile, this is just the start.
We now have a turning point in the relationship, a turning point that creates opportunities for Canadian families, for Canadian businesses, and Canadian workers.
Carney has also accepted an invitation from Xi to China himself at what the Prime Minister's office calls a mutually convenient time. Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC News, Gyeongju.
So how much of a turning point was the Prime Minister's meeting with the Chinese President? Vina Nadjibulla is the Vice President of Research and Strategy at the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada, and she joins me now. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
So the Prime Minister seems to have had a cordial meeting with the Chinese President on the sidelines of the APEC summit. But from what I can tell, there wasn't a lot accomplished concretely other than an agreement to meet again.
Yes.
What do you think? How did this high-stakes meeting go?
Yes, so definitely no breakthroughs, no announcements on trade or tariffs, as some people were hoping for, and very much a change in tone and an indication of a change in direction. So Prime Minister Carney wants to see the relationship deepen and broaden. He's already signaled that he will be traveling to Beijing to continue the discussions and to explore what is feasible. But we don't have a lot of details and specifics. He hasn't said exactly which areas of the relationship he wants to deepen, where are still going to be our red lines. So I think there are a lot of questions, but on balance, a constructive, positive meeting that was about half an hour, so not as long as some of the other meetings with Japan or the US, but an important first step in this kind of new moment, a turning point in the relationship.
Yeah, according to the readout from the Prime Minister's office, they both directed their officials to move quickly to try to resolve outstanding trade issues and irritants. So as you say, maybe not a breakthrough in terms of what they actually accomplished, but that's something, right? They at least now have some sort of agreement to have their people meet, maybe work through some of the things that have been so punishing for our countries.
Well, irritants is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence because there are many issues that we still need to unpack. I mean, obviously, we do need to have dialogue and constructive relations with China, but we should not forget that China is a complex actor to work with. There are many strategic challenges emanating from China to our national security, our economic security, to the things that we care about, be that from Taiwan to South China Sea to obviously Ukraine, right? So there are many issues. We can't just say we will move forward, and yes, there are some irritants. Well, there are many more things than just irritants that need to be addressed.
Yeah, to that point, I mean, we've had a very poor relationship, right, with the communist regime in Beijing. Obviously, the Meng Wanzhou affair. We're dealing with these tariffs. We have our tariffs on EVs. Yes. They have their tariffs on pork and canola and other products. There's also, as you say, the troubling instances of foreign interference in our democracy in our country. Do you think it's wise for Carney to pull a little closer to Xi, given what we've been through over the last number of years?
I think we have to proceed with caution. Yes, we need to have better relations. I think Prime Minister Carney is right in saying that it has been 8 years since the last leader-to-leader meeting, and yes, we need to have those discussions. That is important. He's absolutely right. But we also need to be cautious and have realistic expectations of what is possible with the Chinese Communist Party and what kinds of safeguards and sort of guardrails we're going to continue to have in place to be able to protect our interests as well as to be able to protect issues like foreign interference and so forth. So should we improve relations? Yes. Should we get close to China? No.
Yeah, it's interesting because Carney has not said much about this. We'll wait to see the final press conference and maybe he'll give us a little more details. But I'm thinking back to the federal leaders debate from the last election.
7 months ago.
7 months ago. And when Carney was asked about this issue, he suggested that China is the biggest threat, the foreign interference threat to our country. Right?
National security threat.
National security threat to our country.
Yes.
And now he's sort of heralding a possible thawing of relations between our two countries. It's amazing how there has been really kind of an about-face, frankly, in not a very long period of time. Do you think that's because of economic necessity? Is it because of what we're dealing with the United States and Trump and the Trump factor? Is that maybe why he's more open to a relationship with Xi in China?
Well, the reality is nothing has changed in the Chinese Communist Party's behavior in the last 7 months. Nothing publicly would suggest that any of our concerns around foreign interference or any other challenges to national security have gone away. What has changed, JP, is the context in which we're operating. What has changed is our relationship with the US and the urgency with which we need to diversify our relationships. So China is a part of that, but we have to recognize that it's not as if we can solve our problems with the US by somehow turning to China, right? I mean, we can't kind of move away from one bully and run into the arms of the other. I mean, we have to be realistic about what is possible in this relationship. We do need to deepen relations where there are opportunities. So if China wants to buy more of our energy product, absolutely. But at the same time, we have to reduce strategic dependence. When it comes to a sector like canola, arguably, we're already over-reliant on this one single market. So, and we have to be able to diversify. In other words, do more trade where that's possible, but be very careful not to become dependent on China at a time when both China and the US have shown that they can weaponize interdependence. So the solution is not China. The solution is not just the US. We have to be able to have a diversity of partners, and we have to continue to focus on building strength here at home.
On the trilateral dynamic, the Canada, China, US, one of the few times that Carney spoke up during that Oval Office meeting with Trump earlier this month, if you remember, is he chimed in when Trump was talking about China, saying that we're stronger together if we work to kind of check Chinese hegemony. And now they are both kind of on a different footing, right? I mean, Trump's just brokered this deal with China. Carney's looking for one of his own. What do you make of how those three countries interact moving forward? Do you think that there is now more of an opening for Canada now that Trump has signaled he wants to do business with China and get to the bottom of some of these irritants?
Absolutely. I think job number one still is to stabilize relations with the U.S. because the U.S. remains our most important partner. And whatever we do with China to de-escalate the relationship, to slightly improve the relationship, has to take into account what that means for our relationship with the U.S. So you're absolutely right. There are still things like, for instance, critical minerals and rare earth minerals, where we are trying to work through the G7. So Canada is leading initiatives in the G7, where U.S. is also a party, to try to create options and alternatives because China dominates that supply chain, right? So we are still moving on these diversification de-risking initiatives. And we're still seeing that having too much of our trade and economic relations dependent on China is a problem. So I think we have to be able to do multiple things at once. U.S. relations, stabilizing that, diversifying with Japan, South Korea, Australia, Southeast Asia, Europe. I think one of the takeaways from this trip that Prime Minister Carney had to the region was how much time he spent meeting with like-minded partners like Singapore, like Australia, like New Zealand, talking about ways of preserving rules-based trade through the CPTPP and linking it to what's happening in Europe. So in other words, having alternatives away from both the US and China.
Yeah, and you called this trip a success for that reason, perhaps, right? It's not just about the Xi meeting. He also had those other bilaterals. He also was deepening ties with South Korea, a major economic partner potentially. Why are you calling this meeting a success? Why do you think this trip, this 9-day swing through Asia, was a bit of a success for Mark Carney?
It was. It was an important, a significant trip that allowed Prime Minister Carney to clearly articulate his message of what Canada is going to be bringing to the region and how Canada is going to be a stakeholder, not just in economic relations with the region, but also in the peace and stability of the region. So, for instance, signing a defense and security partnership with South Korea is a huge step. It's a first in the region and would allow our defense industrial base to work closely with South Korea. So, doing the same with the Philippines, for instance, Minister McGuinty will be traveling to Philippines just this weekend to sign a visiting forces agreement. So for the very first time, JP, Canada is showing up in the region, not just as someone interested in trade and economic relations, but also as a partner invested in peace and stability of the region, as a partner that has a vision for what the rules-based order, what this new emerging order could look like now that the U.S. is no longer a leader and China continues to be protectionist and aggressive.
All right, let's leave it there. Thank you so much, Vina Nadjibulla with the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada. Appreciate you making time. Nice to see you.